All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to be looking at a guy, well, he's almost legendary, Götz von Berlichingen, knight, rebel, and a pretty innovative guy too. I mean, the guy had an iron hand.
Yeah, talk about a figure straight out of a novel. But no, Götz was real, very real. Very much a man of his time, too. Born back in 1480, the world was changing, knights, feudalism, it was all starting to crumble.
So, like, all that change, that kind of sets the scene for Guts becoming, well, Guts.
Right. I mean, picture it. You grow up, everything's in chaos. You'd learn to be independent, maybe even a little defiant. That's Gus in a nutshell. Became a knight for hire, like a mercenary, basically, in the Holy Roman Empire.
Not your typical knight in shining armor, huh?
Nope. More like a pragmatist, I'd say. A warrior rolling with the punches. That's what made him a hero to some folks, the ones who saw him as, like, fighting for them against those nasty nobles. But to others, he was a criminal, straight up. Complicated guy, that's for sure.
And then there's the Iron Hand, right? What a story. How'd he even lose it in the first place?
Siege of Lanchette, 1504. Vicious fight. Guts, always in the middle of it all, boom, hands gone. But here's the thing. He didn't just give up.
Yeah, he gets this Iron Hand made. Not just for looks, though, right?
No way. This thing was incredible for the time. Showed how determined he was and how skilled the craftsmen were back then. Imagine, like, articulated fingers, springs, the whole works.
Well, the fingers moved.
They did. He could grip his sword, pick stuff up. Some even say he signed his name with it. Can you imagine? Signing a peace treaty with that thing? What a statement.
Almost like a superpower, adding to his, already kind of intimidating reputation.
Exactly. The Iron Hand became a symbol. It's what makes him a legend, not just another knight.
Some people even compare him to Robin Hood, actually. Do you see that? Similarities, I mean, in like what they did, why they did it.
Well, there's some overlap, sure. Both of them went up against the powerful, didn't always follow the rules. But Guts, he was a knight, part of the system he was fighting. And his reasons, they were probably more, well, mixed. Part of him wanted justice, sure, but there was ambition there too. And a good dose of just being practical.
Not afraid to say what he thought, either.
Oh, right. Like that time he got a message from the Swabian League. Bunch of powerful nobles basically threatening him.
Yeah.
And Guts told him to, well, kiss behind.
Bold move.
You bet. Became such a famous story, Goethe even wrote a play about it. That's how you know you've made it, right? Goethe's writing about you. Guts is a part of history for sure.
And his own words, too. We have his autobiography. Didn't happen too often back then, a knight writing his own story.
Very rare. And of course, he probably made himself look good, maybe stretched the truth a little, but still, valuable. It's his thoughts, his reasons, why he did things, even the stuff that was, well, controversial.
So Götz is more than just a fighter with an iron hand. He's living in a world that's changing fast, and he's not afraid to speak his mind.
Yeah, exactly. Shaped by his time, but shaping it too, in a way.
Yeah.
And to really understand him, we need to dig into those events that shaped him, that context,
Like the Peasants War, that massive uprising.
Yeah, 1524, 1525, huge moment in German history, and for Guts, too. To figure out this guy, we got to look at that war.
So, what was this Peasants War all about? Where does Götz fit into all this?
Well, it was like years of tension just boiling over. The peasants in the Holy Roman Empire, they were getting squeezed, taxes going up, forced labor, no rights. Then the Reformation comes along with all these new ideas. They wanted justice, social justice, economic justice.
So this was like a big deal then, not just some local thing.
Oh, yeah. They were taking on the whole system. And Götz always loved a good fight against authority. He was drawn right into it.
But wait, he was a knight, right? Part of the class the peasants were rebelling against?
Right. That's what makes it so interesting. He was kind of in both worlds, understood what the peasants were going through, and he'd spent his life fighting the powerful anyway.
So he saw a chance to, side with the underdog. Fight for a cause he believed in.
Maybe. But don't forget, Götz was a practical guy. He wasn't joining the peasants just out of the goodness of his heart. He made sure he and his men got paid for their services.
So like a mix of idealism and looking out for number one.
Yeah, it's rarely simple, right? He was fighting for something he believed in, but he was also taking care of himself and his guys. That's what makes him so complicated, so interesting.
What did he actually do in the war, though? Just another soldier, or did he lead?
Oh, he was a leader, for sure. In the Neckar Valley, he was a big deal. Led the peasant forces, fought in battles, even captured a few cities.
Did he actually change how the war ended, though?
Hard to say. The peasants, they lost in the end. Nobles crushed them pretty brutally. But Götz being there, it showed how widespread the anger was. Even knights were on the peasants' side.
So even losing, he still made a point. Showed the system was messed up.
Exactly. And that's what people remember, that spirit of going against the grain.
So we got this rebel knight, inventor with an iron hand, leader in a huge rebellion, hero, outlaw. Where does he land in history?
Good question. It's one historians are still arguing about. People loved him, hated him, all while he was alive. They locked him up a bunch of times. But others saw him as, like, a folk hero, someone standing up to tyranny.
Some of the things he did, though, they weren't exactly, black and white morally.
Right. It was a rough time. Lots of violence. He probably did things for a whole mix of reasons. Ambition, wanting justice, just being practical. That's what's so fascinating. He makes you think about the good guys and bad guys, how it's not always so simple.
A man of his time, but his story, it feels like it's about more than just that time.
Absolutely. Look at the impact he had on German culture. Remember that play by Goethe?
Götz von Berlichingen, right? Made him a legend.
Exactly. Goethe romanticized him, made him a symbol of freedom, of being German. People are still fascinated by him. He's part of folklore, inspired writers, artists, even politicians.
It's crazy how one guy can have such a big impact on culture, even centuries later.
It's the power of stories, right? They shape how we see the past, how we think about now. And Goethe, he's a story about rebellion, being free, fighting against being controlled.
And it's not just a story. There's the Iron Hand, too. It's in a museum.
Imagine seeing that thing in person, knowing it was his, it held a sword, signed documents, shook hands.
Yeah.
It's like a piece of the past you can actually touch. History was real,
And the Iron Hand, it's not just about him anymore, is it? It's like it means something bigger.
It's about bouncing back, overcoming stuff, adapting. It's about human ingenuity, too, what we can come up with.
Speaking of ingenuity, let's talk about how that hand worked. It was high-tech back then, in the 1500s. What made it so special?
Well, the fingers moved, like we said. But it wasn't just a lump of metal. It had springs, levers, all this complicated stuff to make it move. Think about it. They made this thing centuries before modern medicine, engineering. They had to know anatomy, mechanics, how to work with metal.
So it wasn't just some blacksmith who threw it together. It took, like, a whole team, right?
Exactly. You'd need someone who knew the body, someone who knew how to build stuff, a whole group of experts. To pull it off back then, amazing.
And they probably had to try a bunch of times, make adjustments to get it to fit right and work right.
Oh, yeah. Imagine trying to fit that thing, making it comfortable, getting it to actually work. Shows how patient Götz was and how good those craftsmen were.
So Götz wasn't just, like, given this thing. He was part of making it.
Yeah, a real team effort. It shows how humans can push past limits, find ways around problems, even when it seems impossible.
And that's an idea that still matters today, doesn't it? Not letting what holds you back stop you. Götz's hand, it's not just about him. It's about what humans can do.
And that brings up a good point. How much of what we know about Götz is actually true? How much is just stories that have grown over time?
It's like, how do we separate the real guy from the legend? How do we even know what's real?
Yeah, it's like the puzzle, right? You got the history books, but then you got all these stories people tell. They get passed down. How do you know which pieces are real?
Exactly. And Götz, he lived when stories were, like, everything. People believed him. They shaped how everyone saw things. And his own book, sure, it's a good source, but he probably made himself sound better, right? Maybe exaggerated a little.
Got to be careful then. Can't believe everything you hear.
Right. But that doesn't mean his story isn't important. Even if some of it got, more exciting over time, the main stuff, the rebellion, the hand, how he changed things, that's all real.
That's what makes history so cool, though, right? Trying to figure out what really happened.
It is. It's not just dates and names in a book. It's like getting into the past, seeing how complicated it was and how it made the world the way it is now. And someone like Götz, he's a good place to start, right? Big personality, big story.
Exactly. It shows you that history was about, like, real people. What they went through, what they did, and how they changed things, even after they were gone.
And what he left behind. It's like his hand, It's about never giving up, coming up with new ideas, not being afraid to fight for what you think is right.
Couldn't have said it better. He shows that everyone has problems, stuff they got to deal with, things holding them back. But you can adapt, come up with something new, make your own way, even when you don't know what's going to happen.
So for our listeners who want to learn more about this iron-handed knight, where should they start?
Well, his autobiography is a good bet. Like we said, got to read it carefully. But it's him telling his own story.
Like his own personal best of, right?
Yeah. And if you want to go deeper, there's lots of history books, biographies. You can find them online at the library, even go to museums with stuff from back then, including, of course, the Iron Hand itself.
Man, to see that in person must be something else.
It is. Connects you to the past,
Yeah.
to this guy who was both like a regular person in his time, but also someone who, became more than that.
Well, I think we've given everyone a lot to think about today. Götz von Berlichingen, the iron-handed knight, rebel, inventor, legend.
What a story. And it reminds us, history isn't just boring facts. It's about people, their lives, the good, the bad, all of it.
So next time you're facing a challenge, something's in your way, think about Götz. What would he do? Maybe his story can, inspire you, find a new way, don't give up.
And who knows, maybe someday someone will be telling your story too. Until then, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep on diving deep.
That's it for our look at Götz von Berlichingen. See ya next time, folks. Keep those brains working.